Welcome, welcome, welcome. My name is Rob. I'm here to take you through yet another task of ELCO, Elements of Costing. So we're looking at the basics of costing and what you need to know. We've got a fun topic today. We're looking at labour. And what I want to do is I want to look at the broader issues of labour, and then we're going to get straight into the excitement of looking at an assessment task. Remember, this task has been set by AAT. So it's the sort of thing that you would expect to see when you do your assessment proper. So, without further ado, what I would like to do is to show you what is the game we're playing today. The first question, if I can press the right button, that was helpful. The first question is identifying whether the following statements are true or false. Well, it doesn't help you that much, but in essence, it's all about the issue associated with calculating somebody's pay. Very straightforward, I believe, for all of us. The second one is to then go ahead and calculate the basic wage and overtime. Now, there are two angles to this. So what I thought we would do before we go any further is to look at the sort of angles that you could have playing out with regard to this. The sort of issues that we have with labour are, first of all, the definition of what it is, but I think it's quite straightforward. That's a cost classification issue. But of course, what we may have is production labour or non-production labour. Just be careful of these because these can catch you out in the exam. And also we may have direct and indirect. And a lot of what we do here is playing out about the difference between these two. Okay? So if we know that, we're a long way towards success, health, wealth, and possibly even happiness. Beyond that, then we've got to look at the calculation of labour. And when we look at calculation of labour, the sort of things that we have are the classic basic rate, you know, the amount that you expect to be paid. We also may have piecework or bonuses or overtime, or a mix of them all. So those sort of things could arise. And then further to that, we have the joy of looking at the issue as to whether the labour is direct or indirect. Now, you could say, well, hold on a moment, Rob, you just mentioned this. But what I was trying to discuss over here is that some labour is indirect to begin with, and that's no problem. We would deal with it as an overhead element. But what we have to be careful of is looking at direct labour and whether all of the direct labour costs are truly direct. So I thought we would just catch up on that before we go any further. So we're looking at direct labour. And we're saying, well, hold on a moment. They may be direct labour in so much as we can identify their role directly in relation to the product, but this may give rise to direct costs or indirect costs. Now that seems a bit odd. But what we're trying to get at is this. There are situations where direct labour may not be working in a situation where we can directly link those costs to the units being produced. Now, the basic rule goes something like this. If they are in productive work, i.e. they are producing something, then that will be direct. But We will also look at this at productive work at the basic rate. You see, the issue goes something like this. I may be working for 50 hours this week. 10 hours are overtime. Does it make sense for me to charge the basic rate for the 40 hours that I normally work for some units, but a higher rate for the additional 10 hours that I work overtime for other units? Well, the argument is no, it doesn't normally make sense, because the overtime premium just happens to relate to those units because of the point at which they're produced, in spite of the fact that those units could be exactly the same as units produced at other times of the day. So normally the only thing we have to worry about is that the direct cost is productive work at basic rate. And the sort of indirect costs we would have would be any overtime premium, but also there are other non-productive things that may occur. Okay, so we may have idle time. You know, when for reasons beyond their control, a labourer cannot do their job. Or we may have training. In simple terms, I mean, there are a whole range of things like this. In simple terms, they become an indirect cost in any situation where they are not doing work on the normal production. But there is one caveat, there's one fun bit, and that is that overtime premium may be direct. Could anyone tell me when overtime premium may become direct? Any thoughts? Well, it is only direct when specifically requested by the customer. If the customer asks for a rush order and we say, well, that means we're going to do overtime, and they go, oh, don't worry about that. If they are going to pay for it specifically, then we would charge it as a direct cost. Okay? So those are the rules. And if you remember the rules, everything else should be, I hope, relatively easy peasy, lemon squeezy. Now, we've gone that far. Now let's look at the information given to us. An employee is paid £15 per hour and is expected to make 20 units an hour. For any excess production, the employee will be paid a bonus of 25 pence per unit. So I suppose, if you come across this term, this is some sort of standard efficiency. Okay. A. Identify whether the following statements are true or false by ticking the relevant boxes in the table below. So, what are we told? We are told during a 36-hour week, the employee produces 800 units and earns total pay of £580. Well, I could try and squeeze this in somewhere, but if you don't mind, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go below where we've got a bit more space. And in the first instance, what we've got, if I can get the right button, thank you. We said that we've got 36 hours. And before we start, what we've got is we've got the basic pay for those 36 hours, which I believe was £15. And that gives us, is that £540? Tell me when I'm wrong. Okay. Now, that is a given. What we now have to consider is whether or not they have earned a bonus. So, there's our basic pay. Now look at the bonus. What we want to do is we want to look at how many units they did produce compared to how many units we expected them to produce. So they actually produced 800 units. That was the actual production. How many units did we expect them to produce, given the number of hours worked? Well, they worked 36 hours and we expected them to produce 20 units for each of those hours. So the actual production is 800. The standard or expected production is, what's that, 720. Yes, they have earned 80 bonus units. And for every unit produced on top, they earn 25 pence. So 25 pence multiplied by 80 comes to £20. We've come to 560. Okay, so pretty straightforward stuff, but make sure you take it step by methodical step to ensure that you get the correct answer. So where are we? Up to the top. Well, the suggestion here is that the total pay was 580. We calculated, if you remember, 560. So that's false. Okay? Yeah, so this is not difficult. We can do it, can't we? Are there any questions? Is everyone happy? Right. Now let's move on to the next one. During a 38-hour week, the employee produces 880 units and earns a bonus of £30. So here we're simply focusing on the bonus and nothing more. Okay, so if that's the case, we don't need to do the basic rate stuff. I think we can focus straight on the bonus. Now, pick up on the numbers. I managed to mess this one up when I first did it because I misread the numbers. And as with all of these, the assessment tasks, the most likely way for you to make a mess of it is by missing a number rather than any theoretical issue, which I'm sure you have no problem with. So 880 units was the actual production. Now, what was the standard production? So we've got a standard production, that's 38 hours this time, 38 multiplied by 20, and we multiply that by the rate per hour of 25. So what have we got here? 880 minus 120 multiplied by that, and we come to £30. Okay. That is the bonus. That's all that was required. So I can't remember, my brain being a sieve. So back to the question. We said that the bonus was £30. Hey presto, that is true. Okay? So step by step, each of these worth 2 marks. I think it's relatively generous, and it's something you definitely should be able to do. If you look at what the examiner says in the examiner's comments about this, this is a topic area that they suggest is quite straightforward. It's one of those ones that everybody gets right, okay? Barring, I say, stupid computational errors. So, during a 39-hour week, the employee produces 1,000 units and earns a total pay of 640. Back to our workings. So, we've got our basic pay. 39 hours multiplied by 15. And I'm sure that would be easy if I had a brain. Yes, I'm sure you're all shouting the answer. Oh, I sort of... Right, okay, fair enough. 585. And then we have the bonus. And the bonus, we have 1,000 units produced. Now, in the 39 hours that we actually work, we expected to produce 20 units each time. So there's certainly a bonus there. And we want to multiply that by 25 pence per unit. So what have we got? we've got 1,000 minus 780 gives us 220 multiplied by 0.25 comes to 55. You may say, why am I writing it out like this? I don't need to write it out like this. Well, yes, you don't need to write it out like this for the examiner, but if you write it out in a clear and understandable manner, you will find it easier to understand what's going on. Okay, so we've got 640, back to the plot. Whoa, our 640 is true. We are correct. So we just scored 6 out of 6, and that really must be what you are expecting to score. Okay? So moving on, what have we got here? Ampleford pays a time rate of 13.50 per hour for a 38-hour week. Any employee working in excess of 38 hours is paid an overtime rate of 20.50. Okay, so we've got our basic wage and we've got our overtime. B, calculate the basic wage, overtime and gross wage for the week for the 2 employees in the table below. Note, if no overtime is paid, you should enter 0 as the overtime for the employee. Well, we're not getting many marks, are we? So it can't be too difficult, okay? This must be something that you are able to do. Now, the only thing I would say is you've got to be careful what they've asked for here. They've asked for the basic wage and the overtime, because you may be inclined to take the total hours at the basic rate and the overtime premium, yes? So you could be asked something fundamentally different, yeah? But basic wage suggests that we focus on the 38-hour week at 13.50. Yeah. So 38 multiplied by 13.5, we end up with 513. And I believe that that will be the same for both of them. Okay. Now, when we look at the overtime, this shouldn't be too difficult. I'm going to write it out separately just so we can see what's going on. But what we're going to say is this. When we look at S. Albertini, whoever that person is, we see that the hours worked were 40. The normal hours were 38. So they got 2 hours of overtime, and we multiply by the overtime rate of 20.50. So I've got a sneaking suspicion that that comes to £41. So my gross wage is 554. Is everybody happy where these numbers are coming from? Good. And when we look at J. Ashif, we've got 44 hours minus the 38 multiplied by 20.5. And I think that comes to 123, doesn't it? So we end up with £636. So, not much this week. A relatively small requirement, only 8 marks. But I've got to ask you, how many marks do you think you should really have scored there? Well, yeah, if you ask me, you should be scoring 8 out of 8 there. We're looking at pass, we're looking at merit, we're looking at distinction. Yes, you should be able to get this sort of thing right. Now, of course, this is just one illustration of the sort of assessment tasks that may arise. And the examiner may do a range of very different things just to make your life more fun. But if we go back to the sort of things that I was illustrating before, we had a tiny bit of was it direct or indirect. We had an element of basic rate and bonuses, yeah? And we had some basic overview of these elements. You've got to remember that when we look at elements of costing, we are focusing on those core skills that you will need, not just for ELCO, but also going through to MAC when you get to level 3, and to 2 more papers, the budgeting paper and the decision making and control paper at level 4. So these little building blocks seem very simple. They should do at least. But a full and comprehensive understanding of them is absolutely vital. Absolutely vital, both now but into the future. That's all I have for you this week. So what I'm going to say to you is thank you very much for watching. If you've got any issues, contact us and we will assist you as best we can. I look forward to seeing you next week for even more excitement in the ELCO paper. Bye now.